Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I'm Carly Riley, and today is Friday, or at least this episode is airing on a Friday, and usually that means it would be a weekly recap episode where I, and maybe with a guest, talk about everything that happened in the world of NFTs and the metaverse for the past week. However, this week I am in Brazil filming an NFT Web3 related doc, you could say. And so I was not able to do a weekly recap episode this week. However, I have an amazing guest interview for you all. I'm really excited about this one. I wanted to have this person on the podcast for a little while now. She's doing some amazing things in the space, and we're going to dive right into all of it. Today on the podcast is Randi Zuckerberg. Randi was the director of market development and a spokeswoman for Facebook for 7 or 8 years. She spent 10 years in Silicon Valley. She's the founder of Zuckerberg Media. She's the founder of Hug, which is her Web3 venture we talk a lot about. She's the creator of Dot, which is a young character who spawned several books. She's an author, a Tony Award-winning Broadway producer, a Sirius XM radio host. She's worked in so many different industries, primarily connected to tech and or the arts. So she's an amazing person to talk about NFTs because it sits right at the center of this wheelhouse. She's starred in a Broadway play, if I didn't mention that. So we really talk about that intersection here in this episode. We talk about the patterns that she's seeing play out in Web3 that she recognizes from her Web2 days and from her early social media days. She tells a story of how she created Facebook Live, which is a fun one. We talk about her Web3 project Hug, of course, and then we talk a little bit at the end about what it's like having her very famous last name. I think you are not going to want to miss this one. Randi is amazing. She's such a light in the space of Web3, and I'm excited for y'all to get to know a little bit more about what she's doing. Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I have a very special guest today, the one and only Randi Zuckerberg, founder of Zuckerberg Media, Hug XYZ, which we're going to talk all about, the creator of Dot, a children's character, which has led to children's books. She's a published author, a Tony Award-winning Broadway producer, a Sirius XM radio host, among a myriad of other things, which is pretty incredible. Randi Zuckerberg. Before we dive into our conversation, here is a word from our wonderful sponsors.
It's increasingly obvious that everything will become tokenized, and NFT marketplaces needs robust financial reporting, performance analysis, and the peace of mind that they are compliance ready. GILDED's NFT Ops is a one-stop financial reporting solution for growing NFT platforms. GILDED has developed marketplace-specific modules to track the financial performance of NFT creators, including revenue tracking, collection metrics, royalty payments, and revenue share. Customers of NFT Ops gain full access to accounting tools and powerful APIs for custom integrations that simplify operations, streamline reporting, and produce tax-ready data. So no wonder why so many top brands like CoinMarketCap, Gitcoin, Nifty's, and POAP trust GILDED to automate complex reporting workflows. Visit gilded.finance/bankless to learn more. RARIBLE is the NFT platform that's leading the charge into the multi-chain universe ahead of us. Available on Flow, Tezos, Polygon, and of course, Ethereum, RARIBLE is the perfect place for NFT newcomers, profile picture collectors, and experienced NFT traders. RARIBLE has a variety of NFT features that set it apart from other NFT marketplaces. They have a native messaging function allowing you to DM your friends or haggle with sellers. They also have a mobile app on iOS and Android with a built-in NFT portfolio tracker tool, so you can easily check the value of your digital art portfolio. RARIBLE is built on the RARIBLE protocol, a multi-purpose, open source, and community-governed NFT protocol that helps build products and services across the NFT ecosystem, including white label marketplaces tailored to specific NFT communities. So go to rarible.com and start discovering and trading NFTs, putting in floor bids to join PFP communities, and DM with some brand new internet friends.
Randi, thank you so much for joining me here today. I am so grateful to have you on the show.
Carly, it's such a pleasure, and I've been a longtime listener. I love it's such a great show, so I'm delighted to actually be here. I feel like I've made it in Web3 to come on your show.
Wow, I appreciate that. It's having you on makes me feel like I've made it, so it's mutual for sure. So I listed some of what you've done in your career. You have worked in and succeeded in just so many different industries. Web2, certainly, tech, media, business, theater, writing. Now you're in Web3. As a way to maybe dive into your story a little bit, I'd love to get your tips or your perspective on how to manage such a dynamic career in which you've spanned so many industries. What do you tell people who want to emulate that?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I believe that a career can have so many chapters. So if you're like me, I think I'm on the 15th chapter of my career. But if you feel like you're on a second, a third chapter, and sometimes the chapters don't even make a lot of sense on their own. Like for me, my first, and I know we'll get into this more, the first chapter of my career was around being on the front lines of social media. Then I had a chapter where I went and performed on Broadway and produced Broadway shows, and you would think those two things have nothing to do with one another. But then fast forward to this kind of third chapter I'm in of Web3. Web3 is all about the intersection of the arts and technology and understanding how to value an artistic deal and also a business deal. So what I love most about it is that I bought my first NFT about 6 months ago, and now here I am today as a founder in the space. So never too late or too early to have new career adventures.
And has it been for you like a matter of following your gut, or like what has been the guiding principle as you've, picked different industries to enter?
I think the biggest thing is just always having a strong why for why you're doing anything, because so much of the world is about hype and it's about FOMO. And if you're getting into a space that's really noisy because of FOMO or because everyone else is doing it, it's probably not going to end well, because no matter what you do, you're always going to be outsmarted, outworked, out hustled, out accessed by someone else. But if you get into a space and you have a really clear why, and for me, I've always had two whys running throughout my entire career, which is supporting the arts and allowing creators to go direct to their audience. That's been a theme in everything that I've done for the last 20 years. And also of making sure that women have access to new financial vehicles. And so for me, getting into Web3, it was a very, very clear why I was doing that and what lane I needed to stay in. And I highly recommend that for anyone who's thinking about exploring dipping a toe in or having a new career in a very noisy, hyped space.
Okay. So you joined Facebook in like 2004, I think the year it was founded, right? The year Mark founded it. So you were at the inception of this company that is truly one of the most influential institutions in the world and that has ever existed. I'm curious, and you were there for like 10 years. You were there for a long time. So you saw it through all of its growth. Was there an aha moment for you at Facebook? Or was there a moment that you can remember where you were like, oh, this is going to be huge? And then I'm curious what parallels you're seeing now to Web3, or if you've had similar moments now that you've been in Web3.
Yeah, it's interesting to say that. And it's funny, I'm chuckling a bit to myself because I was working at an advertising agency in New York City at the time, and I loved my job and I loved what I was doing. So when I went out to kind of hang out with the early Facebook team, I thought I was going out for a weekend to just give some advice, and then I ended up staying for 10 years. So I'm just laughing about how things work out in life. But one of the things that I realized really early was my biggest aha moment at Facebook that I think applies so well to Web3 is that the moment I knew we were onto something was when I realized that we had a product community fit. And so many people talk about having a product market fit, but I really think it's about having a product community fit. And what I mean by that is that we had these like Facebook laptop bags. And whenever I would go through an airport, people would run up to me in early days and be like, my college has Facebook and I love it, and stuff like that. And like I felt so proud to be walking and like wearing Facebook merch, and people would come find me. And that was the moment that I realized I was like, okay, having a product community fit is such a key metric for any business. And now fast forward to Web3, and it's all about the community. I mean, how good you are at building community is more important than even the idea you have or the art that you have a lot of the time. And so that was really my big aha moment on just how important that is.
While you were there, you were the founder, creator, impetus behind Facebook Live. This ties into, I think, your comment about always wanting to empower artists in everything you do. This story is awesome. Can you tell the story of how Facebook Live came to be?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you for asking. And yeah, I mean, I guess I've always had kind of an entrepreneur brain and an artist heart. My dream was to perform on Broadway. And so even though you put me in a tech world, you couldn't really take the artist heart away. And so I was always thinking, how cool would it be if we could give people on Facebook the opportunity to be their own television studio or their own radio network. So during one of these all-night hackathons that we would do every few months, I took over this little closet as a studio, and I started live streaming what was going on in the hackathon, like interviewing different engineers and things. And 2 people watched, my mom and dad. It was like a huge failure. I don't know what I thought it was going to be like the next Oprah. And literally it was like my mom, and she told me it was boring and she was signing off.
And was this like on your own personal Facebook page?
Yes, this was on my own personal page.
You started kind of streaming a video out.
Totally. And in
interviewing
2010, you could not just go live from a phone. There was not the streaming bandwidth to do that. So I actually had a friend who was wearing a backpack, like this giant backpack that had like all the technology that enabled us to go live, like the poor guy all night wearing this huge, huge equipment. And I didn't even stay awake the whole night to present my idea at the end of the hackathon because I was so humiliated that only 2 people watched that I was like, okay, I guess this Facebook Live idea that I have is dead. But a few weeks later, I got a call from my friend who was Katy Perry's manager. And he's like, I saw this new TV show that you were pioneering on your Facebook page, and Katy wants to be the first to use your TV show to announce her new world tour. And I almost apologized. I almost was like, I'm so sorry. This is not a real TV show. And then I was like, wait a minute, like, what would the guys do? Like, the guys wouldn't apologize for having a good idea. They would just find a way to make it work. And that was a big moment in my career, and that mind shift. And I was like, you know what? Yes. Katy Perry should definitely launch on Facebook Live. And that was the first ever Facebook Live broadcast, was Katy Perry selling out her world tour in minutes live on her Facebook page.
That's so incredible. I mean, and honestly, a testament to Katy Perry and her team for them also seeing the opportunity as early as they did. So it was like your friends, he was friends with you on Facebook, so saw the live stream you had did and like recognized the potential for what it was. I think that's very cool. I've heard you talk about, back when you were at Facebook, I think you had a mentor who basically told you to be less interesting. And I want you to speak to that a little bit. But basically, I think the thrust of it was, she was like, oh, you're doing too many things, or, men can get away with that. You as a woman can't. You have to seem laser focused on your job or people won't take you seriously, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Totally. And this feels like such a case to that counter, which is, had you not been, different, if you had not been doing other things, which we're maybe talking about on the side in terms of performing, and if that had not been part of your personality, Facebook Live may have never, existed, or would have existed much, much later in the life cycle, because none of those engineers were going to go and grab people into a closet and try and interview them and flex that performance muscle. So I think that's so cool for that reason. And maybe use that as a segue to talk about that story of being told basically be less interesting, and how that maybe shaped your thinking and your career.
Totally. Well, I mean, I always loved performance. And so I sang with an 80s rock band in Silicon Valley. I mean, the standards are pretty low for what makes a good band in Silicon Valley, but we played at a lot of charity galas and like tech company holiday parties and things like that. So I had my 80s rock band. I also, a lot of people in Web3 have seen a recent music video that I did, but that wasn't my first. I've been doing tech music videos like that for decades. And so I had like a music video that I put out about the iPhone launch and like BlackBerry devices and all these things. And I noticed like that the men could get away with DJing on the weekends at different parties and heli-skiing and having like all of these side hobbies, and people thought it was so cool and so interesting that the second that a woman does anything that isn't raising a family and heads down on a job, people are like, oh, she's distracted. She's not a real entrepreneur. She's silly. She has frivolous interests. And it was always this push and pull. And I had some mentors who I really, really trusted who, were a bit older than me, who had seen even, worse situations as women in business. And they were like, you have to be less interesting. If you want to be successful in this Web 2 world, you need to have no side interests, no passions, like just be a serious entrepreneur. And I finally realized that I just didn't want to do that. And it was the moment where I got a phone call inviting me to perform in an 80s rock musical on Broadway. A producer they wanted a tech personality. They had seen some footage of our 80s rock band and called me out of the blue, offering me a leading role on Broadway. And it was that exact moment that I was like, all right, there's two paths to go down. There's like, decline this and go immerse myself fully in my career and be that less interesting executive, or take a stand and show that women in business can have a 360-degree rich life. And maybe that means that some people aren't going to like me, but those people probably weren't going to like me anyway. And so at the end of my life, like, what am I going to have more FOMO for not doing? So I ended up accepting that Broadway role, and that set my career on a totally wild and amazing path.
So that's amazing. So how long had you been at Facebook? Was it 7 or 8 years when you left to go to Broadway?
It was about 7 or 8 years. I had been in Silicon Valley for about a decade at that time. And a lot of people told me, they're like, Randi, you will never be taken seriously in business ever again. If you go sing on Broadway, you'll always just be like that woman who sings. And I didn't believe that was true. I've always believed that there's this middle ground between arts and technology, and that both coasts have it wrong. In Silicon Valley, they're just building these giant platforms for billions of people without caring the content that's on the platforms. In New York, they care so much about the content, they think people will fly to New York to see it. And they don't think about distribution at all. And so I've always believed that there was a middle ground between those two worlds coming together.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Do you feel, were you penalized ever, did you feel, for having made the Broadway decision? Or have there been moments where you're like, oh, I have been taken less seriously? And maybe there haven't been. But I ask that in part because I do think our own beliefs about how other people are going to react to us sometimes influence our decisions more than how people actually would react to our decisions.
Totally. I would say that at first, yes. And then over the years, it became actually a huge competitive advantage for me. So I would say in the beginning, people were just like, okay, Randi's officially gone off the deep end. Why would someone leave this like great role at a company that just went public in order to go sing in an 80s rock musical on Broadway? And I can understand why people would be skeptical about it, the same way I understand why people are skeptical that like I'm buying JPEGs right now in my career. Like I've done a lot of like weird things. It's okay. Like let people be skeptical. But what I will say is that it opened a whole new world for me of understanding how artists and creators exist in the world, because I became one. And it opened up a whole world of understanding how to evaluate the business of an artistic project, because I went from there into producing for Broadway. I ended up producing, I think almost a dozen shows I've produced now on and off Broadway, which I wouldn't have done without that experience of actually acting myself. And I think now in my Web3 world, it's made it so that I can interact with both the techie founders and also the artists and creators themselves, because I know what it feels like to step out on a stage and put your art out there and have it well received or not well received by an audience. Like, I understand the vulnerability of an artist and a creator in this space in a way that I think a lot of other just techie people don't understand.
Totally. One thing that excites me about Web3, and I want to get your reaction to this and see if you agree or if I'm thinking about this wrong, has to do with empowering not just artists and creators, but but call it, the everyday people who are maybe kept out of the accredited investor world. So it strikes me that Facebook, in addition, as just using them as an example, in addition to being a company, has always been a platform. And you saw companies like Zynga. You had multi-billion-dollar companies built atop Facebook. Zynga Games, I'm sure there's many others. And the people who have benefited most from that as time has gone on have been those early investors in Facebook who would have been accredited investors, VCs, folks that probably already had money. What excites me about Web3 is Ethereum is a platform atop which you see all of this stuff being built, but anyone with an internet connection essentially can buy into Ethereum and can take part in that growth. Do you think that's a fair comparison? How do you think about that? I guess it's a broader question around how Web3 maybe differs from the Web2 world, but let's start with that specific example.
Totally. And that kind of goes back to like my second why that we were talking about, which is making sure women are on the front lines of new financial vehicles. And there were so many things I loved and still love about Silicon Valley and about the Broadway world. But the thing that frustrated me so much is that it seemed like all of the opportunities went to people who could afford to write a $25,000 or $50,000 check. And if you couldn't afford that baseline minimum, you were just left out in the cold. You had no network, you had no access into tech deals. Same with Broadway. If you want to be involved in putting a show on Broadway, it's a minimum usually, $250,000 check that you have to write. And why shouldn't we give more people the opportunity to support the arts? Why shouldn't more people have the opportunity to get in on the ground floor of things? So a few kind of let's call it Web 2.5 organizations that I've been really lucky to get involved with. I joined the board of directors of the Motley Fool a few years ago is all about giving investment advice wherever you are on your journey. And then about a year ago, I joined the advisory board for Republic, which is equity crowdfunding.
I'm on a project that's doing a deal with Republic right now. We're going to be using Republic for our
love
launch.
it. And so that was like sort of a big lightning bolt moment for me, was seeing how on Republic suddenly those angel investment deals that might be inaccessible in Silicon Valley because they have a $25,000 minimum investment as an accredited investor, suddenly with $100, you have the opportunity to become an angel investor. And so that was just incredibly exciting to me. And I've been advising and working alongside the team at Republic. And crypto and Web3 just felt like such a natural extension of that. The fact that now, you get to have a direct connection with an artist. You get to make a direct investment into a project and see the upside of that in such an innovative way. Again, this isn't for everyone. And I understand that I sit in a unique place of having had success in business such that I can play with these new financial vehicles, and that's not for everyone. So I try not to couch anything as investment advice that I'm giving or advice. But what I do think is that we can't live in a world where opportunities are only for people who are already rich. And so it's been a big mission of mine to at least inform and educate women about these opportunities such that when they are ready for them and it does make sense financially, they can take advantage.
Yeah. And Republic relies on Regulation CF, which I think was something that came into play in the Obama administration, which opened the path for non-accredited investors to start making investments in companies that I think were looking to raise like 5 million or less. There's still a lot of hoops, and I'm right now working on a project where we're trying to use Republic, but also do something kind of crypto native and marry those two worlds. And it's not a perfectly natural fit yet. Nope, we're not quite there yet. I'm curious, and obviously none of us can know for sure, but given just the breadth of experience you've had in so many different spaces, again, early tech, now Republic, et cetera, do you have any thoughts as to where this all goes regulatorily? And are you optimistic that crypto will help usher in sort of a new wave of laws that are beneficial to everyday investors and to your point, for women and people who maybe have been historically left out of these opportunities?
Yeah, I think right now, crypto is a little bit of a sketchy neighborhood. It's also just like the UX just isn't quite there yet. So it feels like a combination of like being in a really sketchy neighborhood at 3 o'clock in the morning. And also it's like back to the days when I was in college when you could only text message people who were in your same service provider. So like my boyfriend, who's now my husband, had AT&T, I had Verizon, we could not SMS one another. So like how useless is that when you can't even like SMS your own significant other because you're on a different network? So crypto to me feels like a combination of those two feelings of like the uselessness of early text messaging and like the sketchiness of that neighborhood. And so I love the utopian idea of a decentralized world. But I think the reality is that like a little bit of centralization is probably really helpful for where crypto is right now. Because that sketchy neighborhood needs a little bit of security. And we need, some of the big players who understand UX and who have the capability to improve on that quickly to get in the game also. So maybe I'm going to lose some of my crypto street cred to like call for a little bit of centralization. I'm not calling for total centralization, but I do think that until, there's someone to call when your wallet gets emptied and scammed, and until there is like some baseline improvement in how clunky things are, we just aren't going to see the promise of tens of millions of new people coming into the space.
Yeah. I think that's actually the prevailing sentiment. Like you have maxis maybe who are very loud, who just purely want, decentralization in its, again, purest form. I don't think that's the vast majority because realistically, there's no denying what you're saying. It's just you're not going to get everyday people in this if they have to worry about a 10-word seed phrase and there's a trillion different ways that they're going to get scammed or hacked, or they have to be fearful that they're going to lose their net worth.
Yeah. I want to, totally, because I also think like, especially for women, we're already like so entering the space so behind. Yeah. And then if you have to constantly be looking over your shoulder, you're not looking ahead. And like as women in the space, we need to be like laser focused on the future, which we can't be if we're always thinking about protecting ourselves. So I think there's just, there's a few steps that need to happen. And I truly hope, I want tens of millions of more women to get into the space in the next year or two. And I hope we can make the advancements to make that happen.
I want to talk about Hug and really dive into everything you're doing there because I think it's awesome. Final question on this sort of line, though, is about Meta. If you're open to giving some thoughts on Meta, your brother is Mark. You worked at Facebook for 10 years. We're talking about decentralization, centralization. We can cut this out if you don't want to speak on it, but would love to get your thoughts on Meta and that transition.
Yeah, I mean, to be totally honest, I'm much more in the NFT world. And so I'm excited and curious about the metaverse, but I don't quite spend as much time focused in that world. I never actually worked at Meta, only at the company formerly known as Facebook. But what I think is exciting is that their shift to Meta, I think, has really set off so much enthusiasm, fundraising, innovation in the space. So no matter, how you feel about the company, how you feel about the name change, I think that was probably the single event that's happened recently that has set off just a extreme enthusiasm and passion for the metaverse area of Web3. So I'm excited about it. For me, I think the future of the metaverse will probably be AR before it is VR. But I'm an interested and curious bystander.
Observer of what's going on. Okay, let's talk about Hug. You mentioned, obviously, you're very much in the NFT side of things. Why don't you give the overview of what Hug is? There's a lot of components here that I want to dive into, but start with the overview.
Yes, and it's a little hard to give an elevator pitch for Hug because we really are a community-driven effort. But what I will say is that I see it as kind of the second stop on someone's Web3 NFT journey. So there are a lot of awesome first stops out there. There are great communities that are onboarding beginners, that are helping people grow their initial collection and decide where they want to be in Web3. Curious Addy Trading Club is one of my favorite onboarding beginner communities. Meta Angels is one of my favorite onboarding communities. But what a lot of people don't have is they don't have that second stop. So after they've onboarded, most people will be really happy just being kind of hobbyist Web3 or dabbling in it. But a subsection of people want to go really, really deep once they're leaning into the space. And I think for women, for non-binary people, for diverse founders, there's not really a friendly second stop in Web3. There's these like super bro-y alpha groups, and there's a lot of kind of toxic communities that are out there to go deep. But what I was missing in my own journey is I was like, okay, now that I've onboarded, like where's my community of other women that want to go deep in this space together in a really friendly, inclusive way? And I didn't find it. So we decided to create it. So that's kind of in a nutshell what Hug is. And within Hug now, we have about 6 different programs and things that are going on to support people. Because some people, their second stage in crypto is that they become a super collector of NFTs and like almost a curator. And some people take the plunge to become founders as their second step. They get so drawn into the space that they decide that they want to build something. And so Hug really sort of has programs for everyone, no matter what your second step is.
So let's talk about some of those specific programs. Was Group Hug first?
Yes, Group Hug was first. So the first problem that I really felt we needed to solve is the fact that there are a lot of artists and people who have launched successful NFT collections where they have that product community fit that we talked about, but now they're like, oh shit, what's next?
I now have 10,000 people in a Discord looking at me.
That's right.
Expecting things from me, and I need to do something.
That's right. They have like thousands of people in their Discord saying like, when utility, when roadmap.
Like, why does everyone keep spelling when wrong?
Exactly. And so there are all of these founders now that are just like, holy crap, like, what do I do? A lot of them, were artists with no formal business training, or even if you have business training, nothing really prepares you for, like you said, 10,000 people who have bought one JPEG from you and now expect you to be available to them 24/7. So Group Hug, I found myself advising about 20 different NFT collections and founders, and they were all going through the exact same thing. So Group Hug, we decided to form a formal accelerator for projects that have already completed their mint and are now kind of in that like, oh shit, what's next phase, and really helping to apply some of the things that I've learned on the front lines of Facebook and Web 2 on how to turn something that's Web3 native into a really long-term business.
Living a bankless life requires taking control over your own private keys. And that's why so many in the Bankless Nation already have their Ledger hardware wallet. And brand new to the Ledger lineup of hardware wallets is the Ledger Nano S Plus, a huge upgrade to the world's most popular hardware wallet. With more memory and a larger screen, the Nano S Plus makes it easy to navigate and verify your transactions. And the paired Ledger Live desktop app gives you increased transparency as to what is about to happen with your NFT. What you see is what you sign. The Nano S Plus gives you the smoothest possible user experience while you're doing all of your crypto things. So go to the Ledger website to check out the features of the new Ledger Nano S Plus and join the waitlist to get yours. And don't forget about the Crypto Life card, also powered by Ledger. The CL card is a crypto debit card that hooks right into the Ledger Live app, right next to all the DeFi apps and services that you're already used to doing, like swapping tokens and staking. So if you don't have a Ledger hardware wallet, go to ledger.com, grab a Ledger, and take control over your crypto. If you're starting on your NFT journey, you need MetaMask. This is your tool to unlock the world of DeFi and NFTs without giving up custody over your private keys. MetaMask is both a secure in-browser wallet and also a secure bridge for your hardware wallet so that you can connect to any Web3 enabled website. You can now trade tokens with any DEX or aggregator. MetaMask Swap gathers real-time pricing information across the DeFi exchange ecosystem, allowing you to select your best price while getting all of the MetaMask benefits of self-custody, lower gas costs, and increased transaction success rates. MetaMask also has a fantastic mobile wallet, which I use while I'm out and about. And I use it to collect POAPs, NFTs, and use it for all my DeFi things while I'm away from home. If you haven't downloaded MetaMask, you gotta try it out. Download MetaMask for desktop and mobile at metamask.io, or load up your Ledger, Trezor, Keystone, or Lattice hardware wallets so that they too can get into Web3.
I think when I spoke with Ali Downey and Alex Kavalakis from the Meta Angels team, they've announced they have this very early stage. If you have an idea and you're trying to take your project from idea to mint, they've launched this program to really get you there. And then this feels like the next step,
Yeah, it's like the graduate.
That's the feeder into Group Hug.
Totally.
And then I believe there is something called Hedge Hug, which is a beautiful, lovely pun that is just very Randi in the everything I felt from you, which is just like fun and lovely and funny. What is Hedge Hug?
I love puns. I hope anyone who's interacted with me in Web3 knows I don't take myself seriously. I'm in on the joke, like I'm in on the cringe with everyone. And so Hedge Hug is our slightly earlier stage program. I would say it's not as early as what Meta Labs is doing when you are like have your, Angel Labs, when you like just have an idea. But Hedge Hug is, okay, you have a team, you have a community, maybe you're a month away from your mint and you just need a little extra oomph and support and hype going into the mint. That's how we work with programs, because we had a lot of people who were applying to Group Hug and hadn't quite minted yet. So that's a very different journey, though, from the growth stage businesses that are going through Group Hug. So we launched Hedge Hug to support slightly more upstream.
And how many projects right now do you have in each of these?
We have 8 projects in Group Hug. We have 2 in Hedge Hug, and then we actually also have an artist in residence program. So in every cohort, we accept 3 artists in residence who are one-of-one artists. One-of-one artists are such a crucial part of the NFT ecosystem and very often overlooked for these giant PFP collections. So we have 3 one-of-one artists who aspire to work on a bigger collection, and we're helping, either match them with a founder, match them with devs, help them grow their idea. So that's been really exciting and rewarding to have also.
And are these time-based programs as well? Like you're in the program for X number of months and there's programming during that. Explain a little bit what it's like for the folks going through this.
Exactly. And it's a little it's not like your typical accelerator program where everyone lives in the same city together. And go. I mean, we have NFT collections all over the world that we're working with. But our early stage program only lasts through your mint. And then at that point, you're either kind of graduating to Group Hug because you've had a successful mint and what's next, or maybe we're holding your hand a little bit longer if something isn't quite going up to expectation with the mint. Group Hug is a 1-year program. And companies are coming into that already having minted, ready for the next phase of their journey. And we're really working closely with them for almost a full year that we're advising them on building that roadmap and long-term growth. So it's exciting. We're constantly changing things, and we're actually just opening up applications for our next cohort of Group Hug, Artist in Residence, and Hedge Hug also.
We will definitely include the link to that. If you send it over to me, we'll make sure we have that link so folks can go and apply. What are you seeing as the common denominators amongst projects that are successful, and then maybe the common denominators where projects are consistently struggling and need support from something like this?
Yeah, I would say a few of the things that I'm seeing that are leading to success is when founders are really willing to get out there and tell their story. I think in Web 2 world, a founder could still hide behind a PR team that would do most of the work, or a spokesperson. In Web 3, you can't do that. No one is going to love your business like you do, or no one's going to tell your story like you do. And so a lot of what we're doing is getting founders comfortable putting themselves out there a bit more.
Media training.
Media training. We run a lot of Twitter spaces for Hug. And so we're always putting all of our founders on there to kind of get their sea legs with speaking in front of big groups of people, and then encouraging them to go out and do more of that on their own. But I realize, like, what you and I are doing right now, this is not a skill set that's comfortable for a lot of people. This is a lot of people's worst nightmare. And, but it's such an essential part of success in Web3.
I feel for introverts in this space as somebody who kind of is one, which people are always surprised by. But like, I think it can be, if you're like an artist and you're like super introverted and shy and just want to make your art, I'm like, I know it's tough, this world we're living in where you kind of need to be out there telling your story. And so it's great to have a resource who can kind of help walk them through it.
Totally. I also feel like I end up acting as like a therapist or like a professional mom. I'm literally a professional mom. That's what I am. Like, I've been calling myself for years a professional mom to entrepreneurs. And it's like never been more true than in Web3, because the biggest similarity that I see between Web 2 and Web 3 is that is this kind of crazy frenetic pace that everyone is going at the beginning. It was like that in the beginning of Web 2. Like when the iPhone first came out, the mad dash to create apps for the iPhone was like exactly like what I'm seeing now with Web 3. And a lot of founders burned out right before it got good. And I really don't want that to happen again, especially to women in this space. And I know, not only are women hustling to launch these things, but then they're just like constantly demoralized by the fact that like some dude will launch a project that has a 27 ETH floor a few hours later. And then meanwhile, you see like world of women that's been like hustling for months and months and months, and like their floor is dropping. And that's like incredibly demoralizing for, I think, all women in the space to see the reality of what's going on like that. So I spent a lot of time as a mom, as a therapist, as a friend to a lot of our founders, because it's a tough pace. It's an emotional roller coaster. And I want all my babies to like still be standing in a few years from now.
And is your advice or is your perspective, if you can stick it out, if you can not get burned out, and if you can make sure you protect yourself so you're not working at a pace that means you're going to leave in a year, in 3 years' time, a lot will open up? Or what are you telling folks?
Totally. That's literally my only advice, is to like, make sure you're still standing in the year 2025. If you are still standing, like if you haven't been thrown out of the dodgeball game by 2025, like you're going to win, because it means that you've pivoted. It means that you've like not burnt out. You've had enough resources to hang in there. Because that's what I saw in Web 2. If, all of the early Facebook apps and all of the early iPhone apps, like they all changed, they all pivoted. But if you could just hang on for a few years to watch the ecosystem mature and understand what customers wanted, you are so much better poised for success.
Are the folks you're advising, is this their full-time job? And do you feel like for folks and for artists who want to launch into this space, it needs to be a full-time job?
I think so. For Group Hug, if you are like, you have to be committed to a long-term journey. So we do require for anyone in our Group Hug program that it is their full-time job and that they're all in on it. What I would love to see, though, is I would love to see a world where people can be hobbyists in Web3. I don't think that's really the sense right now. I think that's why the space turns a lot of newcomers off of it, is because there's this sense that either like you are 24/7 in it drinking from the fire hose, or you're not like a real crypto person. And in order for this world to really expand and for all of, new money to come in, a new opportunity to come in, we have to make room for the hobbyist NFTers and the hobbyist crypto people. And so I would love to see a world where people feel like they could launch a collection on the side as a hobby. But unfortunately, I just think right now the atmosphere just isn't conducive to that.
There's some advice that I love from Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love and is, just prescient about a whole bunch of things, in my opinion. And she wrote a book called Big Magic. And one thing I took away from that was she didn't quit her day job until she wrote Eat, Pray, Love, which was, a huge, massive success. But she had actually published several books before that. But the reason she had never quit a job, despite having published all these books, was she was like, she never wanted to put the pressure on her writing, this thing that she loved so much, to sustain her financially. Because she worried if she did that, it would ruin this thing she loved so much. And hearing what you're talking about, it resonates for me along those lines of the unfortunate thing right now is if you want to be an NFT artist or if you want to be in this space, you kind of have to put the pressure on it to make it the thing that sustains you because you need to be at it 24/7. But I do think that as the market matures, that will be something that will not be the case, right? Like you can do social media on the side right now, and then grow it into a business that you do full time, in time.
Absolutely. Just like someone can have a podcast or someone can be on social media. And I think once some of these big players get into NFTs a bit more, it'll be easier to
Who are
to
big
launch your art on the
big
side.
corporations? Who are the big players you're thinking of?
I'm talking about like Pinterest and Instagram and Shopify. And like once some of these big players make it just like a button that's on, a site you already have or social media. Yes, exactly. Then I think that makes it just so much easier to, of course, that's also going to mean you have to cut through a lot more noise because if it's easier for you to launch your NFT collection on the side, that means it's easier for millions of other people to do that also. So there's pros and cons with that come with all of these things. But I mean, I'm just even thinking about podcasting. There's some staggering statistic I read that said that like most podcasts don't even make it past 4 episodes. So if you can just make it to like the 5th or 6th episode of your podcast, you are much more likely to have success and longevity in the future.
Here we go, overpriced JPEGs.
Yes, overpriced
We're
JPEGs.
there.
Like it's just like most things in life that like just being still standing like actually really matters.
Yeah, so many people quit before. Right before it opens up and gets good. I've now referenced this book. So God, I'm so sorry to everybody who listens to the show, but there's a book called The War of Art. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's fantastic. And it makes that case. The author makes the case. Like he personifies this idea of resistance, which is everything that fights against you as an artist. Like everything that procrastination, that fear to start your art, to do the thing you love, right? And he's like, resistance gets strongest right before you're about to succeed, and I think that's true. I think so many people give up right before the breakthrough.
Totally.
What are there areas that you think are ripe for NFTs where we haven't seen a lot yet? Like what are some of the underexplored areas that you'd be excited to see projects take on, for example, in this next cohort of huggers, if that's what they're called?
For sure. I'm really interested in the tie between crypto and philanthropy. I think that's something that is really interesting because, there's so many incredible organizations and philanthropies out there, and also a lot of organizations that are not really very well run or not making the best use of finances. And I think applying that, to the blockchain, that accountability and that layer of being able to see exactly where money is going, it could be such a game changer for making donors feel comfortable with philanthropy and keeping organizations accountable. And so I'm really interested to see what is that layer of like Web3 NFTs and philanthropy? So that's something that I'm really keeping my eye open in this next round of group hug and hedge hug applicants. And then also I think, I'm looking for kind of that level of like the pipes behind a lot of what we're doing. Like what's going to be like the media company of the future that's built on Web3? What's going to be the office collaboration tools of Web3. And I think as a lot of our behaviors are changing, I will personally fund anyone who is making an alternative to Discord. Like, I will just say that. Like, if someone can build a viable alternative to Discord, like, I'm there. Call me, please, because like Discord is a Ouija board of chaos and destruction, and it cannot be the only way that we communicate.
Okay, I love that. Let's actually use that to talk about Hug Hub and what you're doing there. Explain to folks what Hug Hub is. It's another spoke in this grand hug wheel, and I'm excited about it.
Thank you. And we are on Discord. So now that I just like spent all that time like slamming it, we are there. But like, hence the reason why we need an alternative. Yeah,
I agree.
It's like a necessary evil right now, but I'm, my eyes are open for an alternative.
It's part of this broader, like the UX UI in this space needs improvement, right? Like we're also all buying on Coinbase and transferring over to MetaMask and, like having to find the weird part of our iPhone where we can turn off iCloud syncing from MetaMask. Like we're all doing these things, but like this is obviously not the best it can be.
Exactly. Okay, so we are on Discord right now, but one of the projects that originated from the community that's now become kind of the central thing that we're doing at Hug is we are creating a database of hundreds of women and diverse-led NFT collections that we're calling the Hug Hub. And for the last 2 months, we've had over 300 community curators in our Discord who have been pouring through thousands of NFT collections to create these really detailed analysis and description and what they like about the collections. And we'll be launching that in our Discord and then as an external site called Hug Hub, where anyone can go and actually kind of do research on NFT projects alongside the community. So we'll be launching with about 200 NFT collections and 100 one-of-one artists. And what I will say is that it will be viewable for anyone, but if anyone wants to be a curator and actually contribute content to the site and reviews and add collections, they will need to hold the Hug NFT Pass.
Which has started minting. It started minting quite recently.
Yes, it started minting recently, available on OpenSea. And what we said publicly is that they come in hugs, matching hugs, the NFTs. So even just having one side of a hug will get you into Hug Hub and into our Discord and the research community. But having a matching hug is going to unlock special things.
Okay. I want to get into maybe the NFT a little bit more in a minute, but I want to stay on Hug Hub and a couple things that stood out to me about this. One, if I understand correctly, you have these 300 curators, but they can't actually contribute information about a project that they themselves own. Is that true?
Correct. So we divided everyone into kind of these mini groups to go through collections, and each NFT collection had about 30 curators that had their eye on it before it got approved for the site. So it wasn't just like one person deciding. And people had to recuse themselves or get moved around to different groups if their group was assigned to an NFT project that they had a close relationship to the founder, had advised on, were a holder of themselves. So we really wanted people to be advising as neutrally as possible. And so it was exciting to see the results that happened. And a lot of these curators, I mean, they were taking it so seriously. They were going into other communities' Discords and asking questions and poking around on social media and really getting a sense of what the community was like for these different projects and how helpful, how welcoming to newcomers. So I'm excited. I think the level of research and analysis on each of these NFT collections is really unique to what the space has so far. And I hope will really elevate and bring a lot of diverse NFT founders and collections into the public light who might not be noticed otherwise.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that struck me is no negatives. You can only speak about the positives of a project. Explain the thinking behind that.
Yes. So again, I mean, we're called The Hug. We are all about embracing creators. The last thing that I would ever want to do is tear a creator or a founder down. This space is already rough enough. Like no one needs to be kicked. when they're down in this space. And so I believe that there is something to be complimented about any project. And so just like when you get out of an Uber kind of suggests some compliments for you, like nice music, good conversation, like clean car. Uber doesn't pre-suggest any negative things for you to say about the driver. And we want to do the same thing. So we want compliments to be really pointed and detailed. We're not going to suggest compliments like this project is awesome, because that's not helpful. But we will say, we will recommend compliments specifically about the roadmap, or specifically about the art, or specifically about the founding team. Because we think that there's probably something nice to be said about anyone. And if you don't have something nice to say about a project, well, that also speaks enough for it without having to come in and say something negative.
And so if there are projects, because there are, of course, rug pulls, or there are projects that have nefarious intent, if a project like that comes across the metaphorical desk of your curators, is the idea that it just doesn't get onto the platform at all? Like, how do you ensure that you're also successfully almost warning folks off from projects that maybe are bad?
Yes. Then if we have that sense, because a project has to kind of cross about 30 different people's eyes before it gets put on the site, my hope is that we will protect it from a lot of those. We might not. There might be some that slip through the cracks, and we'll figure out as a community what to do with those. But a lot of people seem to be kind of just doing their own research in a vacuum right now by themselves. Yeah. And so at least, I'd love to see people benefiting from research that the community has done and benefiting from adding their own thoughts to projects that are out there. But if something seems nefarious, it will likely not make it onto the website, given all the checks and balances that we have.
So it being on there in and of itself in the first place is a certain stamp of safety. It doesn't mean you're going to make money. It doesn't mean you're not going to lose money. All those things can happen, of course. But it does at least mean 30 eyeballs who have looked at this thing and said, this is not a rug pull.
30 eyeballs have evaluated the founding team, the health of the community, the roadmap, and the art itself. Yeah. So if it's still a rug pull after that, then it is a very thorough, sophisticated rug pull.
It's a very sophisticated rug pull.
One other thing I will say is that, there are hiccups that come about in NFT collections. Like, for example, there was a situation with Crypto Chicks with the collection, where it came to light a few months ago that the original artist had plagiarized at least one of the pieces of art in the collection. And now, that is a collection that probably would have made it through our database, because it does have a great team around it, a great community, cool art. So we've had a lot of discussion, even in our own Hug community, about what you do when that comes to light. And I will say that the new team that has come in to turn Crypto Chicks around has been really thoughtful and really fantastic. And so I'm hoping there's a way with Hug Hub that maybe we can temporarily kind of put a caution on a project, but give the team the benefit of the doubt of turning it around and overcoming those hurdles.
So for right now, it sounds like Hug Hub is not a place where you're not going to search any NFT project and find it. If you want to read an evaluation of Bored Apes, which you can find anywhere at this point if you'd like it, but you know what I'm saying, that's it. But if you're looking to really invest in some projects that maybe have been overlooked or underlooked, it feels actually more, whereas you can sort by certain traits. You can sort by, I'm looking for a female founding team, and you can read about projects that maybe haven't crossed your radar otherwise. Is that a good way to describe it?
Absolutely. We're launching with all female and diverse-led projects in this first assortment of what will go up on the site. And so if you're looking to just get information on the top 20 collections on OpenSea, there's a lot of information that already exists around those collections, a lot of analytics tools. What we're surfacing is, do you want to collect more LGBTQIA-led collections in your portfolio? Do you want more Black-owned collections? Do you want Latinx collections, female founders? Our hope is that as Coinbase NFT and big players come into the market and bring millions of new collectors, a lot of these people are going to be, want their wallet to say something about themselves, and will be interested in identifying with specific kind of founders. I also hope that as more liquidity comes into this space with some of these huge exits and huge blue chip NFT collections, I hope that a lot of those people who've seen returns will turn around and pay it forward in the community by investing in projects that were traditionally underlooked. So that's our hope, is that Hug Hub can be kind of like the place to find all of those, because a piece of my soul dies every single time someone posts on Twitter, like, I want to collect some women-led projects, drop them in the comments, and then everyone just scrambles to, post their project, and it's like thousands of comments. Like a piece of me dies every time.
There has got to be a better way.
Exactly.
And now this poor individual has to go sort through 1,000 projects to figure out what's legitimate, what's not.
That's right.
How in real time do you anticipate this being, in the sense that right now you're launching with, I think you said 200 or so projects that'll go up initially? Is this going to be, hey, here are some projects minting this coming week? Is that the hope, or where do you see this evolving?
Yes, so we're going to have a whole calendar around projects minting. Our first go around is projects that have already minted, just because it's much easier to do research on a team and a roadmap and a community on something that has already been minted, rather than something that hasn't been minted yet. So a lot of the focus will be on projects that have already minted and the NFTs are already out there, or they're in the process of minting. But I hope over time, as we open this up to the community and allow any of our NFT holders to start contributing to the site, that we'll actually, have a world where there are thousands of NFT projects that are minting, have minted, that are on there and that you can search by.
Do you think this is creating a art renaissance where, and I've said this on the show before, growing up, art collecting or buying art, just seemed like this thing that parents did, I guess, but even as I've gotten older and had slightly more disposable income, it's never occurred to me to buy art. And do you think NFTs are changing that, where the younger generation is suddenly going to have an interest in art and in owning art in a way that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise done? Oh,
100%. I think there are millions of art collectors that are being born because of Web3. I know even for me, my physical art collection has grown so much more since entering Web3 and getting into digital art, because I've gotten so interested in art. And then I've also developed relationships directly with artists. And now, not only have I collected some of their NFTs, but now I'm chatting with them about the actual in real life paintings and things that they're doing too, and getting to know that. And I think before this kind of renaissance, as you mentioned, it felt really inaccessible for a lot of people to collect art. And there were so many middlemen. You had no opportunity to have a direct relationship with an artist. You had to go through a gallery or a website or something. And it felt so unpersonal. And art is such a personal journey, collecting art. So I think the best thing about the space, honestly, is that we will see millions of new art collectors that are born from this digital world.
A couple more questions, because I know we're almost at the end here. So you mentioned Hug minting has happened. If you own even half of a Hug set, you can get access to the Hug Discord, which will give you access to these lists of projects. Anything else you want to share about what holding a Hug NFT will do, or holding this pair might do?
Yeah, I just think, we have such a great community in the Discord right now. So if you want to be part of, I guess we can sort of call it an alpha group, because that's the lingo out there. But if you want to be in like I call it Web3's friendliest, most welcoming alpha group, we'd love to have you. No matter whether you identify as a collector, a curator, or a creator yourself of art, anyone who's on that second stop in Web3, we'd love to have you. So Lisa Chow is our artist. She has created these adorable matching hugs that we've divided into left and right sides. And so, like you said, even having one half of that side will allow access to everything. But we also have learned in coaching other projects that utility is really the future of NFTs and providing in real life utility. And so matching hugs will have some special utilities that I'm not allowed to talk about because we're still in the minting window. And so I don't want to convey anything that could jeopardize legally what we're doing, but I'm excited to reveal that over time.
Thoughts about how NFTs in the theater world may mesh. I know theater is something you're so passionate about. You obviously are in the NFT space. Where do you see live performance evolving to? Would love to get thoughts. I know I've saved these big lofty questions for the end of the show, and you're like,
I love it. And it's so funny because about a decade ago, I gave a talk at TEDx Broadway that was basically calling for decentralization of theater without even using that word, because that word wasn't in our vernacular yet. But my whole TED talk was about, how do you ever expect this industry to move forward with so many middlemen? And that's, I think, what I'm so excited about. I think DAOs can become a huge vehicle for producing the arts and shows and bringing new things to life. I think new emerging artists and writers in theater won't have to wait to get a producer or a theater to fund them. They can launch an NFT collection that kind of explains their script and their storyline and their music and actually get the backing of a community rather than the backing of a few rich producers. So I think this could completely change the way that arts are produced in this country.
Can you name some of the, for people who don't know the theater process, what are some of the middlemen right now that hold the process up?
Well, first of all, there are only 40 Broadway theaters. So if you want to actually, and there are so many shows that are good enough to be on Broadway, but so you have to do the politicking to get your show to be one that's accepted by one of those theaters. So that's a huge gatekeeper that's there. The other big gatekeeper is that it costs about, I would call it $12 to $20 million to put on a Broadway show right now. And but there's not a lot of institutional capital that's funding Broadway. So shows are brought to Broadway one $25,000 check at a time until $20 million have been raised, which is insane. I know, doesn't that give you heart palpitations?
Yeah. 100%.
So not only, the lead producers of a show have kind of figured out a way to outsource that, because you would spend a year just raising those checks and not focusing on the show. So there's now a whole middle layer for any Broadway show of co-producers who basically are just tasked with raising a portion of that money. So if you come in and you write a $25,000 check to a show, you will not only will you probably never ever meet the lead producers of the show, you will certainly never meet the artists or the actors or the creators of the show. So you could finance a show, you could win a Tony Award for that show without ever having met the person who wrote it. And for me, that was when I realized that about the industry, that was one of the most horrifying moments. I felt so sad. I felt like the magic of the theater industry had been ripped out from under me. And that was when I was like, no, I will never work on a show in that old way again. I will only work on a show where everyone putting $1 in feels like they're part of the process and meets the creators and all of that work is done in tandem. Like there's no reason why someone who wins a Tony for a show should ever have not met the creator.
Do you have plans in the works? Do you have any like things up your sleeve?
I know. I wish I could talk about them. But what I will say is that if anyone listening out there is in that small Venn diagram like us of like the intersection of theater and Web3, come find me. We are a small crew in Web3, but we are vocal and we're passionate. So come find me because we're putting some cool things together.
It's so interesting for me coming into Web3, and as a result of being interested in Web3, learning about all of these other industries, learning more about the legacy music industry, learning more about the art world, and like realizing how messed up and just like inefficient and stupid all of these old models are has just been such a fascinating thing for me that does make me so bullish on NFTs. I do think it's going to take longer, and I don't know about with theater specifically, and I guess I'd be curious in your thoughts. I think some of this is going to take longer than we'd like it to. I think the music industry, their systems are so embedded and so screwed up, and there's all these legacy deals and contracts that are in place that can't just be unwound with an NFT. So it's going to take time to really have this play out. Is that,
I
would you agree?
I agree. And especially for theater, I think we're going to first start seeing this with new emerging artists because a lot of the shows that are going on to Broadway right now are either what's called a jukebox musical, where it's like the music of Green Day or the music of Aretha Franklin. And like that, I mean, that's like way too much IP issues to do something like that with Web3. Yeah. Or the other category is like blockbuster movies that are now getting turned into musicals. Like there's like Mrs. Doubtfire, the musical, or like Beetlejuice, the musical, like whatever, call it Moulin Rouge. And like that has too many IP issues also. So I think the kind of artistic projects that are going to be ripe for leading the way in Web3 is kind of these like solo singer, songwriter, or playwrights, indie, that own their own content and can experiment with it.
I think that's so exciting though, because we need that. I mean, what you're describing is so happening in the box office, in the movie world, right? Where all we see are like remakes of Fast and the Furious 100 or whatever. You know, like it was actually interesting. There's an interesting chart that shows there's zero overlap in movies that were nominated for Academy Awards this year and like the top grossing box office hits. Whoa, like there's this total stratification happening there. And Web3 as a way to empower more interesting storytelling that's maybe a little riskier if you're if you're a financier or a Hollywood whatever, just trying to make a movie that you know is going to do well in the theater, but that actually has an audience that would be really excited about it.
Absolutely. And just like theater is the same. Like I always tell people, if you want to see great theater, like don't go to Broadway, go downtown and see like the kind of raw, early emerging work. And unfortunately, most of that never sees the light of day in a commercial way.
Okay, last question, and you could also decline to answer this because it's maybe a little bit more personal. But I interviewed Griffin and Duncan Cockfoster, who are the co-founders of Nifty Gateway, and I had to ask them about their last name because it's Cockfoster. And I was like, that felt like, how was middle school for you? For you, your last name's Zuckerberg. Your brother is one of the most famous people on the planet. What is that like for you? What has that been like, having your brother become one of the most recognizable people in the world and having the last name Zuckerberg?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked the question of the Nifty Gateway guys, because I actually had them on my radio, on my Sirius XM show, and I just didn't have the courage to ask that. So I'm glad you did. But it's really been such a journey for me. And what's interesting is that I feel like, I was so swept up for so many years in like supporting my brother's vision and being at Facebook. And I think it was right around the time that I got that call for that Broadway show that I realized I kind of had this, like, call it like third life crisis where I was like, oh my gosh, if someone made a movie of like the story of my life, I wouldn't be the lead character in it. Like, how did I get to like my early 30s being the supporting character in the story of my own life? And, I'm so proud of all the work that I did at Facebook and in Silicon Valley. But I think for me, that's like really shaped a lot of my career. And even being in when I started being a little more vocally present in Web3, I could not figure out like why anyone cared what I had to say about anything, because my entire career I've been like the other Zuckerberg. Like I've never been like the one that people wanted to listen to or cared about. So I feel like it's been fun, but also wildly uncomfortable for me to step into this new, more visible world in Web3. So I hope what people can take away from this is that, you know, we're all learning and evolving as people and all coming into our own identity, no matter our age or where we are in our careers.
Well, I'm so glad you have, because I think you are obviously adding so much to this space, from Hug, from, you know, the insights you can share from having been a part of Web 2 and social media and that rise for 10 years. I mean, I think you have so much wisdom to share. I'm so grateful to you for sharing it. Thank you for coming on. I really, really appreciate you. And we'll definitely have to have you come back, because I'm now curious to dig so much deeper into theater and NFTs. So when you do finally launch something, please come back. I want to learn more about how that's going to play out.
Carly, you're amazing. I mean, I love the fact that like the leading podcast in this space is a badass woman like you.
Thank you. I don't know. I think Kevin Rose has something on me, but I will catch up to him eventually.
You got it. You got it. Just still be standing in 2025.
That's it. You honestly have inspired me with that. Like when I'm stressed or anxious or like feeling like I'm underwater, I will literally, that'll be the mantra for me. It's like, you just got to still be here in 3 years. And like, I know I can do that. So
I know awesome. You can too. Thank you.
Thanks, Randi. I'll talk to you in 3 years. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.